Welcome to the program. It feels like just yesterday to me that I recorded the pilot episode of this program, and maybe 2-3 days ago that I interviewed my first guest for this show, and yet here we are, more than a year later, and 31 episodes and countless interviews later, and we're still growing this program and building our community, our international community of curious minds. So I want to begin by thanking you as we conclude season 1 of this program. Who knew? Certainly I didn't have any expectations for how many listeners there would be or how many interviews we would do or even how long season 1 would be. Not something I necessarily thought through when we first got this program going. I just thought it was important to start recording, to start talking with the smartest people we could find about the most important topics that affect all of us, and we covered a lot of ground in that time. And you've stuck with me through that entire journey. So I want to thank you all, everybody who subscribes to this show, everybody who has shared this program with their friends, their professional network, their family members, their community, fellow leaders in your industries, whether you're in the for-profit or non-for-profit, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, whether you're based in Western Europe and North America or anywhere in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and around the world. I want to give a big thank you to everybody who has stuck with this program, helped us build this community of curious minds, and I hope you'll stick with me as we continue to build it. For everybody who's downloaded a show, who's been listening to it on their commutes to and from work, thank you. To those who prefer to access this program through YouTube, thank you as well. Our YouTube clips have been performing really well, both the short form and then the full episodes that we occasionally share. We don't share every full episode on YouTube, but some folks just like the snackable 5, 6, 7-minute clips that we post, and it gives them a taste for what the show is all about, and hopefully they then come back to the website or to our podcast channel and they listen to the totality of the program. We also have some great folks who are following me on social media. I am on all the major social media platforms, posting about our shows routinely, engaging with you all. And of course, we have our website, brianjmatos.com, which is the home for all of the programs. If you've missed any one of them and you want to listen to any show going back to the pilot episode, they're all archived there, every episode available on the website. And of course, those are also all available on any of your favorite podcast platforms. If you're joining us here on episode 31, thank you, but you've missed a lot. So I encourage you to go back to the first pilot and listen to that few minutes of me talking about what this show is meant to be about. And then follow us on the journey. There's, at this point, dozens of hours of content, interviews with some very intelligent people, and this could help make for an exciting listening journey for you on a road trip, if you've got big travels planned, or if you've just got a lot of commutes coming up and you need something to fill your ears and fill your head. We'll be happy to serve that purpose for you. So today I wanted to take a pause and do a couple of things. First of all, this is the final episode of season 1. We didn't know how many episodes we do in this first season, but we're going to pause it here at episode 31, take a look back at some of the great guests that we've had along the way, and preview what we're going to be doing in season 2. And also I wanted to give some thoughts as we end this season, and just given where we are in society right now and all the big trends that we covered, there is one among them that I felt requires a little more perspective from me. And I've been told by many of you that you want to hear more from me. You love the guests, but you want to hear a little bit more about my perspective on issues and topics, because that is what makes the show unique after all. These guests could go on any program, but I try to ask them questions they've not heard elsewhere, and it comes from a perspective, a unique perspective that I have based on my life and my profession and my passions and my family and my background. So stick around. In a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about that one topic. And if you've been with the show, you might have a clue, because back in episode 18 with Tina Woods, I previewed at the very end of that show that I wanted to come back to a topic that we covered there and give some reflections on it. So stick with us. In a couple of minutes, I will expand upon that. But first, in just looking back across all the great people we had a chance to speak with, and I'm not going to go through every one because I don't want to miss anybody. But what you'll notice on my website, and again, that's brianjmatos.com, we have a couple of special call outs on the main webpage as well as our podcast episodes page. We have a most popular section and we have an innovation series. So the most popular session was always going to be interesting to me to see what you all cared about. I'm curious about everything, but it was very important for me to know what you, the listeners, really wanted to hear. And it's fascinating to see what some of those most popular episodes are. If you want to know which has received the most downloads, it's actually one of the more recent shows, episode 25, with Greta Euling. She is the cultural anthropologist from the University of Michigan and the author of Everyday War. And we spent almost an hour talking about everyday life in the Ukrainian war zone. And it tugged at all of our heartstrings. But Greta is so articulate in being able to channel other people's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and stories in a way that are relatable to us. It made for an extremely entertaining, but also thought-provoking and emotional program to really think about the everyday lives of everyday people, because they could have been you and they could have been me. And maybe someday, I hope not, but maybe someday it would be us. All of our guests have been fantastic. They're all experts in what they do. But that is a topic that I don't necessarily know has been covered very well elsewhere. And we did that show specifically because we wanted to humanize this global conflict and help bring it into an understanding for everyday people like you and me about what it is like to live there in the midst of the worst conflict Europe has seen in decades. And that's a perspective that we thought was important to share because, unfortunately, the trend in this world has been towards more, not less conflict. And it's important to understand in a visceral way what that experience is like, because it may be coming, unfortunately, to a country or a community near you at some point. Another very popular show from our series, also done relatively recently, was with Allison Crosswaite. This was the former psychotherapist who, and also former Wall Street executive turned psychotherapist, who then moved into the discipline of what we're generously calling alternative medicine, but it's such a term fraught with misunderstandings and misgivings. It's not even really the right way to think about it. And we spend a lot of time in the episode actually talking about that very topic, how we should think about quote unquote alternative treatments. Now, that's not as surprising to me that there'd be great interest in this. The reason we're covering it is because it is a very important trend that has seemingly grown from the fringes of people's consciousness to everyday knowledge. And matter of fact, I'm recording this in February of 2014. There was an article released not long ago, I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, talking about microdosing. And it was a New York audience, New York subjects, I should say. And it was really focused on women and working mothers. But nonetheless, it was taking a topic that the Wall Street Journal would not have covered in the past. And people who wouldn't have been willing to talk openly, even if some of them chose to keep their names and their titles and the companies they work for private, it just wasn't a topic people were willing to discuss at all before. Now, Allison and I spent a lot of time talking about things, and microdosing mushrooms was a very small portion of it. So I don't want you to think that that's the reason it was the popular show. The point is, people are clearly seeking alternatives to traditional treatments in the medical community, and this is a global phenomenon. In some parts of the world, this has been part of healthcare forever. In other parts, they've trusted the scientific community to have all of the answers for all of our ailments, and unfortunately, they have fallen short in many occasions despite all the great advances that have been made in modern Western medicine. Now, a couple of episodes that were very interesting to me, but I was heartened that we're so popular with our listeners. Episode 21 with Ashley Rodriguez, the media editor at Insider, Business Insider, many of you know it as we talked about the trends in mass media consumption. I wouldn't have thought so many people out there were interested in those big trends, but media itself has become a topic to cover. And you talk about a trend that's changing dramatically and changing everything about our world and the way we live in it. It's how we consume content and information. Ashley was a spectacular guest. I love talking to journalists because they understand the right questions to be asking, and they're always thinking 5 steps ahead of everybody else. I am really hopeful that we can get Ashley back in season 2. I think it's important to let some time pass and let some things in the industry develop. But my goodness, so much has happened since that interview in the mass media space that I'm going to be very curious to get her perspective on as a journalist who's been talking to some of the leaders making those changes as more and more people turn to streaming for their content, mostly video, but not just cable cutting, but really stop using television as a primary means to take in content. It's all about their computer, their iPad or tablet device, and their mobile devices. Episode 20, right before I spoke with Ashley, I spoke with another journalist, Sharon Goldman from VentureBeat, where she's a senior writer and editor, and we talked about the business side of artificial intelligence. And again, I look forward to seeing if we can get Sharon back in season 2, because there's a lot of developments that have been happening in this space. But there's also been some stops and starts. Nonetheless, it seems every business and every industry is trying to figure out how to leverage this new technology, and somebody out there is going to be the big winner in this. And then the 5th most popular episode, beyond all those great interview shows, was episode 16, which was simply my Labor Day reflections. That's all it was. Labor Day in the United States, which here happens in September. It was just a thank you, a genuine thank you to all of the laborers out there, all the workers of the world. And I did spend some time talking specifically about the United States, but I wanted people in Canada and the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and everywhere to just know that I and many people like me who spend a lot of our days in our heads in sort of white collar work and professions, that we see you. We love the work that you do. We know how important you are. We know you never get the recognition that you deserve for keeping the world moving. And I'm really glad this was a popular episode. I'm a little surprised. It was one of those that I just wanted to do for personal reasons. I just wanted to use this platform to say something to a wider audience than I usually get to say. And it was just me. I wasn't interviewing anybody. But I hope that means that others who couldn't find the words to say thank you to all those hardworking teachers and construction workers and agricultural workers and manufacturers and nurses and law enforcement officials and firefighters and steel workers and oil rig workers and truck drivers and carpenters and electricians and plumbers, all of the people of the world who work with their hands all day, every day, making this world a bigger and better place for all of us. If my words helped others to say thank you to them, then this show has been 100% worth doing. Now, on the other side of the bracket, also available on my website, is what I'm calling our innovation series. Not that all of our guests aren't innovating in some way, but some are truly the CEOs of their own companies, and they are trying to push the envelope of what's possible in their discipline. So one of our most popular programs in the innovation series was a recent one, episode 28, with Grace McNamara, the CEO of Exercise Intelligence. This is around personalized healthcare, really. And I think what also got people interested in that, if the comments are indicative of anything, it was the entrepreneurship angle. Grace was not necessarily trying to build a company. She was really just trying to solve a basic problem for people, which is that exercise is hard. It's hard to stick to. And if it's not personalized, it's easy to fall off that wagon. And so she just went out there, tried to solve a problem from a good place with good intentions. And she started a company, and it's been doing fantastic with it. I just think Grace was a wonderful interview. And I think the combination of her product and the company she's the leader of, as well as the topic of exercise and its importance in our healthcare, dovetails nicely off of that Allison Crosswit interview about alternative medicine. Not that exercise is an alternative, but our focus on just our general wellness, the movement of our body, the fitness, our overall level of fitness. I think people are hungry out there to hear more about this. So rest assured, we've heard you. We know these have been popular, and we'll be looking for more guests like it in our second season. Sophie Thompson, the virtual speech CEO, a person who struggled throughout the early part of her life with public speaking. And now here's somebody who's so good at it that she comes on a show and has been on many shows to talk about this great solution using AI, specifically some generative AI and virtual reality, to help train people to mimic what it's like to stand in front of your colleagues or peers, or make a presentation in front of a small boardroom, or even talk with a group of 2 or 3 people when it's not something easy for you to do. And she has created a solution that is, relatively speaking, inexpensive. Any company or any organization can access it. And for people who really have a difficulty in expressing themselves to others in small group or medium-sized group settings, this can be a life changer, as it was for her. So love that we were able to bring on a couple of entrepreneurs. And let's not forget Lisa Patel, episode 10, CEO of her own company focusing on modern drug research. And my goodness, we covered every topic imaginable on that particular program. Lisa was a great guest. She spent a lot of time with us. Was very appreciative that she was willing to spend so much time talking through her company, her journey, and where we are on some of the drugs that her company in particular was researching. And again, a CEO who was willing to spend, considerable time with us, walking us through her journey into leadership. Can't forget about Lucy Jung, episode 11. This was her device, her vibrotactile device, that is hopefully going to receive approval at some point in the future, if all proves safe and effective, for Parkinson's disease. My goodness, a disease that affects so many people around the world. And this could be a big breakthrough treatment. And I'm so privileged that Lucy joined our little show to speak to our audience about the solution, but also the trends of how people in her field are trying to help those in their aging years get the best quality of life possible, even with degenerative diseases like Parkinson's. And another Innovation Series one that at first I didn't know if it was going to be an Innovation Series or not necessarily somebody who had built a standalone product per se, but nonetheless, somebody who's done a great job bringing some new thinking to the marketing space is David Allison. And he was generous enough to send me his book on value graphics. And really the topic of the show is how we're getting it wrong, thinking about demographics as the best way to understand people or understand what motivates them. There's a whole different way to look at society. And for anybody out there who's in a leadership position, if you're leading a company and you're trying to connect with your audience, or for someone like me trying to grow my audience, what a great show this was. And David was such a great guest. Now, look, those are only 10 episodes. And 9 of those were interviews and 1 were my own ponderings and thoughts. As I said, this is episode 31, so there's 14 others I didn't get a chance to touch on here, and every one of those was valuable in its own distinct and important ways. So I encourage you, if you have not had a chance to go back and listen to all of these, one of the most important things about this podcast and the goal of it was that these episodes are evergreens. Now, don't get me wrong, I may have been talking to somebody 6 months ago whose product is now mainstream or has been FDA approved or something. So there are things, of course, that can evolve over time. And some of the trends that we were talking about in media a few months ago could have already had some great leaps forward. But in those conversations, we have tried as much as possible to keep them at a level that they will be evergreen and relevant for a very, very long time. So I encourage you to go back and listen to any and all of these shows. You're going to hear from all these people again in the future. If you haven't already, they're going to be on your televisions. They're going to be on your other podcasts. They're going to be on your local radio. You're going to be hearing about them at some point down the road. And I'm so glad that they spend time with us. But all of these topics, every one of them is going to be relevant weeks, months, and years from now. And so I hope you'll get a chance to listen. But even if you can't get to all these shows for the next few weeks, maybe there's going to be a point over the next couple of months where you know you'll have some time when you're doing exercises, or maybe you're getting some physical therapy or something, and half the session is just you working out and you need something to listen to. You can get through half these shows. Most of our interviews are anywhere from a half hour to an hour long. You can get through a good number of these. And some you're going to have to listen to more than once. Some you may have to listen to with more intensity than others. But we've tried to make them all such that whether you listen today, tomorrow, 5 months from now, or 5 years from now, the topics we discussed are evergreen in nature, and they're going to be just as relevant in the future as they are today. And perhaps as you listen to some of these, the trends that we discussed will have become reality. And you can compare what we talked about and what we thought would happen to what actually did. Now, I will spend a few moments doubling back on one particular episode, but also a theme that ran through a number of our programs. And then I want you to stick with me because I'm going to give you a quick preview of how we're looking at Season 2, which will be debuting in just a few days from the issuance of this podcast. And we will be promoting that widely on all of our social media platforms. So if you're not already subscribed to us, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Brian J. Matos is how you can find us. There isn't any major podcast platform that we are not on. So a simple search of my name will find our show, and you can subscribe to us. In fact, you can subscribe to us in more than one place if you want. And if all else fails and you don't know how to get there, or maybe you're not a user of Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you don't know how to find us on Amazon Music, just go to my website, brianjmatos.com, or visit any of my social media channels. You can do a Google search for me if all else fails, Brian J. Matos Podcast. You will find me. You'll also find my YouTube channel, and I encourage you to go there, subscribe, and you'll get the latest clips from this program and some of our episodes, including this one, which will be available in full on the website, on the YouTube channel, that is. And in any of those formats, you'll be the first to know when Season 2 gets underway and when we get some new episodes and some new interviews posted for you. Now, with all that said, there is one topic that I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes on this season finale episode talking about. Back in episode 18, we spent a good amount of time speaking with Tina Woods. And the general topic of discussion was helping aging populations stay healthier for longer. That was the basic premise of the show. And Tina is the CEO of a company called Collider Health, or an organization called Collider Health, which works with public and private sectors to drive sustainable and innovative transformations in human health. That's how they bill themselves. She is also the Health and Longevity Champion for the UK National Innovation Centre for Aging, another organization that Nick Palmarini joined us from to discuss it from the UK's perspective, but really from a global perspective, how we can help people live healthier, longer lives. And we spent a good amount of time thinking about the quality of life and what role artificial intelligence may play in that, what role all forms of technology can play. But the key theme in those programs, and what I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about today, was the topic of aging, and aging as healthy as you possibly can. I do not believe that in much of the world today, specifically the Western world, we put as much value as we should on the value of experience, life experience, business experience, philanthropic experience, leadership experience in all forms. And you can't get to experience without aging. You have to live long enough to have those experiences. So often we dismiss people who are, let's say, past their physical prime. And if we define your physical prime as the point in your life in which you have no real physical limitations of any kind, even if you at some point in your life had an injury or a disability, it didn't restrict you in any significant way from achieving your goals and doing the things that you really wanted to do to live a happy life. And we'll also include our mental faculties. We had our sharpest minds. We had our best memories, our longest memories. We were in a place where we didn't suffer from any cognitive difficulties, comprehension, understanding. We could focus for long periods of time. Now, everybody's peak happens at different points in their life. Some people peaked when they were teenagers. Some people had a physical peak in their 30s. Some people are physically and mentally peaking in their 50s. Maybe there's some who are even peaking later than that, but time has a way of eventually wearing all of us down. And there's this idea that once you're past your peak, you're past that prime moment of your life when everything seems to be working, you have enough experience to know how to make the right decisions in all aspects of your life, and you have the energy and the physical and mental capability to pretty much do whatever you want. It's a magic moment of maturity meeting physical and mental acuity at a very high level, where you still have the energy of youth, but you now have enough wisdom to know how to channel it better and focus yourself. I think there's a reason why so many business leaders and industry titans reach their career peak at some point in their 50s or 60s. Even though we spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about and focusing on those who get there early in life, which are the outliers, the people who come up with the greatest idea in their 20s and they figure out how to put a team together to build it, or somebody who's a wonderkin in their teens and, they're the next Mark Zuckerberg building Meta or something like that. Or the people who it takes them a little while, but by the time they're in their mid-30s, they have figured it out and they've made their first $1 billion because of some breakthrough company that they have developed. But for the vast majority of people, the non-outliers, your best achievements professionally and maybe even personally will not come until a later stage of your life. And that, whenever that is, you may very well be past your physical and mental peak when you get there, and yet you're still achieving the peak of your profession. I would also argue that the peak only means that you've maxed out on the very best version of yourself. But after you've reached your peak, even as you begin to slide a little bit, maybe you have some health issues, maybe you have some physical limitations, maybe your mental sharpness starts to fade, maybe the memory starts to go a little bit, maybe you're not quite as focused as you were before. The reality is, once you've peaked and you've lived all those years and had all those experiences, you at 90% are still better than the vast majority of people at their own 100%. And having been through a peak and still performing at a relatively high level, even if you're a few ticks below what you used to be, it's hugely valuable. And there's an entire universe of young people who are hungry as heck to get anywhere near where you are, let alone where you were when you're at your peak. Now, the reason that I think it's so critical, and we touched on it with Nick and with Tina in our episodes, that we help people who are aging age well, age healthy, age to the point they can continue contributing to society, is because in many ways they have the most to contribute. We have a young generation, many of whom listen to this program, who is hungry. They're hungry professionally, personally, spiritually. They're hungry to get to that place where they have seen their parents and they've seen their mentors achieve, but they don't quite know how to get there. We need those who are in their late 60s, their 70s, their 80s, their 90s. We need them to be healthy enough so that they can mentor, they can teach, they can guide, they can take the phone calls and the conversations. They can take the visits, they can get on an airplane, and they can go and help a kid who's starting up a company and is fumbling through a few of those early stage mistakes that a veteran would know to avoid. Think about the richness of the knowledge, the wisdom, the guidance, the life lessons, and the perspectives that somebody who's been through so much for 70 or 80 years of their life, and let's say that 40 or 50 of those were spent in the corporate world. Let's say 15 or 20 were spent at the height of that. Well, that's 15 or 20 more years than somebody who's just starting out had, and even somebody who's doing relatively well. Think about how much better they can be doing. Think about how much better they can be if they have the benefit of that elder. And for people who are just in families, if you've ever known big families that have a matriarch or patriarch, that person who lived deep into their 90s and held the whole family together, and in them was so much of the family history, the spoken and unspoken parts of the family history, the written and unwritten, they are so important for the continuation of those families. I don't think we put anywhere nearly enough emphasis on the importance of our elders. We used to call them elders. Every tribe that has kept its traditions in the history of this planet has some version of the elders. They are the revered, they are the respected, they are the most important members of the tribe because in them contains all of the legacy and the history and the wisdom and the knowledge that can be used for the future. And yet somehow as our tribes turned into bigger societies and civilizations, we've drifted away from the obvious. We have to elevate our elders, not downplay them. We shouldn't be making fun of them. We shouldn't be thinking anything other than how grateful we are to have them around. And I am so glad that we have people out there focused on this topic of how we can help them age healthy, not just for their benefit, but for our benefit, for society's benefit, for the benefit of the world, for the governments of the world, for the churches of the world, for the communities of the world, and most importantly, for the families of the world. And it's going to be a huge burden, by the way, on the current generation of working people if we don't learn how to help elderly people age healthy and live independently as long as possible. Because there's a lot of seniors, there's a lot of elders all over the Western world in particular. And if we don't help them live longer, healthier lives, the people who are going to have to step away from their lives to take care of them are going to be the younger community. How much is that going to pull out of our economies, our communities, our families? How much is that going to restrict our ability to continue to focus on the future and move forward? If everybody has to go back home to take care of their families, and those who can't need to rely on a system that's overstretched and overstrained, well, the whole system can grind to a halt. We could lose a generation of talent over this issue. So, my closing thought on this, aside from emphasizing how important I think it is, it's a call to action to my younger listeners in particular. You have elders in your life, whoever they may be, grandparents, mentors in the workplace. Maybe they're the most senior or seasoned people in your company. They're the people that your instincts might tell you that they're out of touch, or they don't have anything to contribute to your life because the world is moving so quickly and is so different now than it was in the past. I assure you, you are wrong. If you run a company, if you're aspiring to run a company, if you're in a leadership position in a government or a nonprofit or a public affairs agency, if you have any community leadership of any kind, formal or informal, I assure you there is an elder in your community that has a lot to offer you. And if you want to accelerate yourself, and if you want to make yourself better faster than anything else you can do, any class that you can take, any business school you can attend, any seminar you can sit in, Spend quality time with the elders of your community. And they don't have to be people who have fancy titles either, by the way. They can simply be people who can articulate an experience of their life. And don't just pick their brain about business. Listen as they tell you about their relationships. Listen as they tell the story of their life and how they made decisions and the things they wish they could do over again and the things that they wouldn't do over again if they wouldn't make a different decision, I should say, if they had it all to do over again. The perspective of our elders and thinking about the world from a more experienced lens, even if we can't authentically do it ourselves, if you can begin to do that through the eyes of others, and you can begin to absorb all the wisdom they have to share, you will be 10 times the leader of anybody else who has all the talent but too much ego and doesn't open their ears and listen to those around them, or those who think that the elder generation has nothing to offer them. I would also say to our younger listeners, you'd be shocked how much the elders of our community want to share with us. They've lived their life. They've had their success. They've made their money, had their families, raised their kids. They have already succeeded at life. They have nothing left to prove to anybody. You're the one who has something to prove. You're the one who has a life still to live. And you'd be shocked how much they want to help you. Because once they've been through it all, a lot of times they just want to give back. They spent their whole life trying to take or trying to achieve or trying to get to that next level. And now they're in a place where they don't necessarily need to do that. And they're at the opposite end of the spectrum of a child who is nothing but selfish by the nature of being a child and trying to survive as a human. Elders are nothing but selfless. They just want to give. The reason they talk so much is because they want to be heard. Yes, that's, I suppose, a selfish motivation, but they feel like they have a lot to share. If only somebody's willing to listen. Be the listener, as you are to this program. And wherever you are, just understand that aging and healthy aging is important to you. Your family, your community, your business, your nonprofit, your community groups, your church organizations, whatever you're a part of, aging is a reality. And by the way, in case you ever get too cocky about your own youth and health, just know that you're a day older today than you were yesterday. Next week, you're going to be a week older than you were today. And every birthday that goes by, you get a little bit older, and time only speeds up as you age. It's important for you to think about your aging too. And don't allow time to just slip away. Make sure that you are giving it the healthy respect that it deserves. And take care of yourselves and make sure that you're focused on your own healthy aging at every stage of your life. All right, now let's take a couple moments here to look ahead. One of the things we're going to do is bring back some, those who are able or willing, of the guests that we had in the first go-around. So as we get into episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of season 2, we're going to have some new names, but we're also going to have some old favorites. I also think it's helpful for you to know some of the topics that are on my mind. First and foremost, I think the journalists on this show have all been a hit. I just shared with you a couple of names that were very popular on our podcast series this year. I'd love to have them back if they're willing to come back. But we're looking for journalists that cover other topics as well. And I think it's very important for us to do the best we can to bring really smart, really talented people who cover important topics and who I think are experts in their field. But there's so many things that I want to be able to cover. So let me give you a preview of what we're thinking, and my producer and I are still working diligently on getting guests around all these topics, so I'm not going to commit that we're going to cover every one of them, but here's what's on my mind. Number one, I want to talk more about healthcare policy. I want to talk about healthcare policy around the world. I think that this is a topic that got a lot of attention and a lot of downloads on my show in season 1. We talked about alternative medicine. We also talked about some innovations in healthcare. But healthcare policy is a bigger topic, and it's literally how governments and communities are approaching their aging populations, as we just talked about, how they're approaching these big innovations that are going to be extremely expensive, but they might extend quality of life for a much longer period of time. And in general, how are different parts of the world innovating to think about what the future of healthcare is going to look like? Every advancement extends life a little longer, and with longer lives come new and interesting and hopefully good problems for us. I think we didn't get a chance to talk enough this year about environmental policy and environmental issues. We had the COP28 meetings this year, and I know there's going to be another edition of that coming up. I think it's going to be very important for us to dig a little deeper because it is a huge topic. And we haven't touched much on the climate change issue, but it's a trend that shows up in many, many ways in many industries. And I've gotten a few inquiries from listeners that want to hear more from experts about this. So we're gonna seek out those people. I also think we're going to do our best to get some national security experts on the program. We've had a few people who have great perspectives about specific conflicts, and a few who have a broad enough range to talk about the larger international geopolitical picture. But, we'd love to get some folks on who spend some time in or covering the United Nations and the Security Council to talk about those 5-10-year threats that are still down the road for all of us around the world. Geopolitically, there are some countries we didn't get a chance to cover this year, some regions. We didn't get a chance to spend much time in Latin America. So we're going to look for some guests that can help us understand more of the trends, economic, healthcare, national security, and cultural that are happening in that part of our world. And we didn't get a chance to talk much about religion this year. Always a third rail, I know. But not so much about the specifics of any one religion, but more about trends, religious affiliations in the U.S. and Europe and Asia, and the evolution of those church memberships. A lot has happened, really, over the last year or two, and I'd love to get into that with some of our guests in season 2. So those are just a few things that are on my mind. Healthcare, environmental, UN issues, geopolitical challenges around the world, religious affiliation, Latin America, so many other things that we'll also be able to cover over that time. But I definitely want to try to touch on all of those. So if those are of interest to you, please stay subscribed to my podcast and get more people to subscribe. And I want to hear from you. I've told you what I'm interested in. What are you interested in? What do you want to hear about? Send me a note. I am available by email, if nowhere else, at info at brianjmatos.com. You can find that on my website as well, brianjmatos.com, or access me through Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm on every platform imaginable. So just send me a note with your interest, and we'll see if we can cover it. And also follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm at Brian J. Matos Podcast on YouTube. You can find me there by just searching Brian J. Matos Podcast. And leave comments on my videos or send me a message and let me know what you want to hear. There's no shortage of ways to consume content from this program. So as we wrap up season 1 and get ready for season 2, I want to give a big heartfelt thank you to all of you who have supported me, who have supported this show, who've downloaded and shared. Thank you so much. Makes it a lot of fun for me to know that there's someone listening on the other side of this microphone. And I look forward to speaking with you again in season 2. Thank you all so much for letting me have a few minutes in your ear every week, more or less. And thank you for helping prove that there is a community of curious minds out there. I hope that we can continue to build it with genuine open minds, open hearts, and curious wonderment, much like a child. That's what makes this show fun, is doing some learning and getting to share that with others and getting to connect with all of you. And if things go really well, maybe, just maybe, at some point over the next year, we'll be able to do an event where we can actually invite some of you together. Now, it'll probably be virtual, just the reality of our global audience. It would be hard to do something in person in the next year or so as we build the show. But maybe we can do a live version of this and maybe bring a few of you along with us. So stick with the program and stick with your mindset of curiosity. And so, as I've said at the end of every episode since episode 1, and I will continue to say next season, until next season, thank you all for listening, and I encourage you all to stay curious.